So welcome to Biology 106, AMP2. Hope you're all in the right place. Is there anyone here who's visiting from the hybrid section who normally wouldn't be here but came because I invited you? Thank you. Most of you then are in lab with me today, right? You either had lab with me this afternoon from noon to 3:45, or you're going to be suffering with me tonight from 6:15 to 10. And then my hybrid students will be joining me on Thursday afternoon, and I'll be seeing you at noon. Okay, so the students who are listening in from hybrid, they'll be joining me Thursday afternoon. I'll talk about lab-specific things when we get to lab. Today I want to go over the syllabus and get us oriented, make sure everyone's into mastering AMP. The syllabus you have before you, the yellow syllabus, is posted on Blackboard and is the only syllabus you'll have. It's a combination of both lab and lecture. So everything you need is in one calendar on one document. So if you are successfully registered in the course, then when you go to MyMCC or Blackboard or MyMCC, you should see on here, probably my face, unfortunately, and then a link for Biology 106, Macauley, 15 summer, sections 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and everyone's in the same section. As far as Blackboard, if you're hybrid or regular, you're still listening to all the same announcements. I always get an email from students saying, well, I'm in the hybrid, so do I ignore the announcements? No, everyone's doing the same thing. The only difference is that the students who have chosen the hybrid have chosen the flexibility of attending the lectures, or not attending the lectures really, and listening to them from home. The students who are in the traditional sections, this is when you normally come to lecture, but if you had me for 105, you know that many students sort of self-proclaim themselves hybrid and stop coming to lecture. And I won't be taking attendance. And so if you choose not to come to lecture, I hope you do. I hate being really lonely, but you do know that all the lectures will be posted. They'll be probably up by 7 p.m. each night on Tuesday and Thursday. Before I leave this room, I will upload it to YouTube. So you'll have a new presentation. There's also on Blackboard a historical document of last semester's presentations. And a lot of students have found it very successful to listen to last semester's presentation before coming to lecture. It's actually been a very good method of learning for some students. That way, when they come to lecture, they're not hearing it for the first time. They're actually hearing it for the second time, and things kind of fall into place sometimes. So I'll show you where that is in a moment, but I have last semester's collection of YouTube videos that you could always listen to. Now, if you listen to an older presentation, keep in mind the dates may change, of course, but the concentration, the presentation, the content will be the same, plus or minus a few words. So if I go, for example, we're in Blackboard right now, we're in the course. Over here on the side, you're going to find everything you need for lectures. You're going to find everything you need over here also for labs. So you got all the lecture materials here, all the lab materials here. Mastering AMP, that's the link here for Mastering AMP. Is there anyone here who is not yet enrolled in Mastering? Okay. Haven't tried or a problem? Haven't tried. There shouldn't be a problem, okay? But if there is, let me know as soon as possible. There are some assignments on there that are going to start coming due, and I think how many days it take to make a habit, right? 21 days to make a habit, whatever it is. It's really important you kind of get in the habit of going to Mastering and checking that calendar. Things won't suddenly appear on there, right? But I think it's good if you just kind of check it so to remind yourself of the upcoming assignments so that nothing catches you off guard. Question?
I was on that earlier today, and there were different links from all the way back to February.
Absolutely. Ignore.
None of them went open.
I hope not, because they're last semester's assignments.
Okay.
It's weird, but when you copy, I copied over essentially my assignments from last winter to this summer, and there's no option, weirdly, for me to just simply carry the assignments over and not have them on the calendar. So you're seeing everything from back in February, March, April. Now, here's the way around that. So let me just jump to that right now since that's a good question. And then also over here is a link to the YouTube videos. Okay, so there. Okay, so let me show you the YouTube videos, and then I'll go to the Mastering issue. So under YouTube, it's not there now. It will be in a few minutes. I have my full collection of winter 2015, and these are the same lectures, the same course pack that you have. They're from the Martini textbook. The other set of lectures, and I wouldn't go there because they were using a different note pack and a different course set and a different textbook, but I've got them there as a historical reference. But the ones you would want to look at are the winter 2015 if you want to look historically and listen to them in advance. And then I will start tonight a new folder that says Summer 2015. When you click on this, it just says Lecture 1, Lecture 2, Lecture 3, and then has the chapters after it that were covered in that presentation. You would simply drag the address here, right-click, copy, and drop it into your browser, and go. And activate your Adobe Flash, and off you go.
Last time we went over.
Okay, so there's my presentation. Everything I've said is there. Everything I've marked on the screen is there for you to peruse. And so there, that's a great tool for you to use. Going back to mastering. When you click on the mastering link, it brings you to a whole host of options. The very top one is where you would go when you're enrolling. Okay, I think yours looks very similar to this. So welcome, right? And that gives you the option of putting in a username and password from a previous semester, or buying the trial, or buying a new one if you don't have this. I wish, now if you click on just mastering assignments, which is what I suspect you're doing, you're going to an assignment list. And there you will be bothered by the baggage of last semester's assignments. You'll see all of the assignments, and those assignments will be sequentially through the semester reassigned through the months of June, July, and the beginning of August. Okay, so those will all reappear, but right now I've only got the first couple of weeks reassigned. I always choose to go down to the bottom link. I don't know why it's on the bottom, but this is the course home. And this gives you sort of access to everything in one-stop shopping. When you go to that course home, the first thing you'll be introduced to is the calendar. Okay? Now the calendar, starting here we are the 19th, and you can see there's some assignments coming up. Each of these assignments are going to roll out. There's usually one a day. Sometimes there's a couple of them. Now these assignments, when you set up an assignment, it tells me how long the average person takes for these assignments. Most of them are 10, 20, 30 minutes. They're not horribly long, but it will take a little bit of, commitment, okay, for you to go into here and do these assignments on a routine basis. These are their due dates. This is not the day you need to start them, right? This is the due date. And last semester, if you had me for Biology 105, you heard me rant and rave a few times about weeks where I had all the assignments due on the same day right before the exam, and most of the class wasn't touching them until the day of the exam or the day before the exam. At that point, it's almost too late. You're not going to have good quality interaction with the content, and it's not going to be as successful for you. The purpose of these assignments is to help you, quote, master, right, the assignment. It's the content. So it's very important that you take a look at this calendar. Now, I also want to point out that there are some assignments in here called adaptive follow-ups, and they're in green. So let's just take a look. Go back. Next Tuesday, by midnight, 11:59 p.m. The reason I put 11:59 p.m., if I put 12, we don't know if it's noon or midnight, right? Most of us AM p.m. So I always put 11:59 p.m. Most of the assignments will be due in the evening. Next week, homework 1 is from Chapter 25. Chapter 25 is where we're starting today. It's on water balance and nutrient balance and where sodium and potassium are found in and out of the cell. That homework assignment, it's already available to you. You could go there and start it tonight. I hope you will. If you get 90% or better on this assignment, you will not have to do the follow-up assignment that's over here called Homework 1, Chapter 25, Adaptive Follow-Up. There's a really cool program built into this. And as each person in the room completes that first chapter's homework, each of you will probably miss different things, right? Each of us has different areas of strengths and weaknesses. And the program is going to sense your areas of weakness. And if you score less than 90% on the homework, which is a pretty high mark, right? But if you score less than 90, then it will create for you an individualized assignment to help figure out your deficits, to help you to master the assignment. If you get at least 90% on the first assignment, you won't have to do the follow-up, and you'll get full credit for having done it. So I hope that's an incentive to do the homework, spend some decent time with it, do it well, and score above 90% so that you don't have to mess with the adaptive follow-up, the second assignment.
Is it set that way every week?
Most of the homework assignments will be set up that way, yes. So the things you see in green are adaptive follow-up assignments back to a parent assignment from a couple of days before that. Other question?
Will that the green
I don't know if it disappears on your calendar, but it will indicate to you that you don't have to take it. You'll get full credit for it. To be honest, I'm not sure what that looks like on your side. I just know you are exempt from it and you get full credit for it if you've gotten 90% or better. Now, throughout the semester, the minimum that you want to earn is 80%. Okay? As a general rule, throughout the semester, and I'll go over this in the syllabus in a moment, but you want to be gaining at least 80% of all the available points in the mastering homework assignments. And if you get at least 80% of all the possible points, then you will get full credit for having done the mastering assignments at the end of the semester. And I'll talk to you about that in a moment. Okay? But 80% is your minimum. If you miss one or two, it's okay. Just make sure you make up for it and do better on a few other assignments. The vast majority of the class gets full credit for doing the mastering assignments. There's a few people who miss a big chunk of them or just kind of blow them off, and those students kind of are upset at the end of the semester when they lose some points. But most students do get full point on these mastering assignments. So does that help you understand what you're seeing? If I go back in the calendar, let me just go back. Oh, look, all those things in gray, April, March, February, those assignments are going to be coming your way, but they're from last semester, and you would not be able to open them. If you went to assignments, though, if you go over here to assignments, I think it's confusing because it's going to start with the oldest assignment. This list is going to show you the oldest assignment, and that goes way back to February. And you have to go all the way down to the end to see assignments that are due in May and June. So I always stick to the calendar when I'm looking at my mastering assignments. Okay, does that help? Now, on here, what's there going to be? There is, coming up, this week, a little dynamic study module. This is a really fun little activity. This will be about the content of today's presentation. There's a little introduction assignment. You may have done the same one last semester. It's 3 or 4 questions just to kind of get your bearings to mastering. And then we start going into chapter homework for each chapter. So every chapter, homework 1, homework 2, homework 3, has a homework assignment attached to it. And then also there are quizzes. And I'll go through that in the lecture in a moment. There are quizzes online as well. And those quizzes are going to help you get ready for the exams. Okay? So that's what's going on in here, and it'll just kind of continue to roll out. I'll try to give you always at least a week's notice on assignments, so things won't just suddenly appear on Tuesday that are due on Wednesday. Okay? I'll try to give you at least a week's notice so that you can be watching this calendar and not get caught off guard by anything. This is also, while you're in mastering, is where you can go to see a full version of the e-text. This is also where you go to get to the study area. And the study area, when you go to the study area, is, if you've been here before, this is where you get to choose what chapter you're dealing with. So let's say we're starting with chapter 25 today. We're going to be looking at fluid balance. And go to that chapter 25. And in here there are guides, pre-tests, quizzes, activities, practice tests, all sorts of activities related to chapter 25. In addition, there are tutorials with videos, interactive physiology exercises, movies, video tours, bone dissection videos, PAL, PhysioX. I mean, there are more activities than there is time in the day, honestly, to do. The only things you have to worry about are the things that are assigned on the calendar. This is just kind of a play area. If you want more, come here and play. This is all on your own. But the things that I'm assigning are the things you want to focus on. And then after you've done those assignments, if you feel like you need more practice, jump into the study area, look around, find something that you want to play with, and go for it.
Is the content in the study area the same as it was last for 1.5?
Yes, this is the same book and the same content areas, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the question is it the same, and it is. Okay, so that's everything to do here, and I'll show you a few more things in lab about PAL.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you go to the different chapters, it's been quite a while since I've taken 105. Will it bring up review options for things that we will not be covering in this course that were covered in 105 to use as a review?
Absolutely. So this is the entire study area for the entire book. So this is going to be stuff that we've reviewed and things that we're kind of assuming that you know as we move forward. So if it's been a little while since you took 105, most of my lectures, when I start off, I will say, I am lecturing on this section of the textbook. The following sections you need to go back and review. And I think you'll find by just looking through the book, it'll bring back great memories, right? Of all the things you already know that are, I'm sort of assuming as we move forward in our conversations here. So yes, this is the full gamut of material from last semester as well. Okay, I kind of got sidetracked, but that's okay. Let's go. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go to the syllabus, and we can be looking at this together. So under lecture materials, you will find right now, this is what you see, you will find the syllabus, and you will find the chapter PowerPoints for exam 1. Okay, so I'm going to go to the syllabus just so we can all be looking at it on the screen together. Oh, I don't want that. Okay, so right to the very top of the syllabus, okay? So my office, my new permanent office is in 1118. We moved offices right after the spring semester, winter semester ended, and our offices are now located right outside of the new construction of where the new building will be in the fall. In the fall, we'll be moving the labs into the new building. We're kind of excited about it. So my office is there, but I'm never there. Right? I mean, I'm down here, literally from noon to 10 o'clock at night. I'm in this area, these 20 steps between here and the other room. So I'm never in my office. If you want to find me, this is where to find me. 105, I'm in lecturing the same room, and my lab is right next door. So this is my domain this summer. I go in to check, drop my bag off, and say goodnight. That's about it in my office. I have a phone number. I have a phone. It occupies a little space in my office, and this is not its number because I don't know how to check my voicemail. So this is the number to my secretary. And if you need to reach me, you can call my secretary. However, I don't know when that's going to get to me. The best way to reach me is definitely my email. I check that often. I respond to it during lab. I check it once in a while if there's any concerns. So please, that is the best way to reach me. And 24/7, I'm usually not too far away from my email. My office hours officially are the few minutes before I start lab at noon and the little break where I had right before lecture. And then on Wednesday nights, I'm hanging around for a few extra minutes if you happen to be around, or really by appointment. So just contact me by email, and we can meet together. Okay, so this is the second half of a 2-semester sequence. Who here took 105 at MCC? I should probably ask you the way around. I can't keep track. Who did not take it here? Okay, a few people who are guests or visiting. And so when I say, 105, that's our first semester sequence, our first semester course. And in our Biology 105 course, it is a survey of all 11 body systems. And we talk about anatomy and physiology, but mostly anatomy of all the systems. And then in 106, this course, we dig in deeper. And we go back and talk a little bit about anatomy, and we dust off what we remember from last semester, and then we dig in deeper on the physiology. How do all of these things go together? So I will assume some things from 105 that you know, and then also, who here did not have me for 105? Who took it here? Okay, so I will be making some assumptions, right, of what my students learned, the things that I expected them to know, and perhaps that wasn't emphasized. So if I assume something, let me know. Okay, let me go back and fix it or fill in the blanks and make it right. So I don't want to jump over anybody, but I will be, quote, assuming some things from your information from 105. There won't be any dissections this semester. The labs are largely physiology. We'll be doing EKGs and urinalysis and muscle physiology and a lot of fun things, I think, in the lab. What you want to have is most of you have the Martini textbook from last semester. This textbook, if you buy it new in the bookstore, comes with mastering and comes with a workbook and comes with a student atlas. If you're just joining the course, you'll want to get that book or something like it from online, but you cannot live without mastering. So if you don't have a different book, that's not my biggest concern. That's the book we used to use. Anatomy hasn't changed for a few thousand years, but when I talk about chapters and when I talk about specific sections, it won't necessarily match up. The good news is in mastering, you have an e-text. Okay, you have a full e-text. So you have access to this book through mastering. So even if you're using a previous edition or a different textbook altogether, you still have access to what we're discussing here. And that's always a good tool if you're walking around with your tablet or something or your computer you have access to the textbook that way. In that package, last semester, you did receive the student worksheets. And not very often, but a couple of times in lab, I may have you turn in some of those worksheets. They're really a nice little review. Also in your packet, and you said you all are enrolled, or most of you, is the code that you need for mastering A&P. Now, if you are carrying this over from a previous semester, all you needed was your username and password that you had used to enroll in Biology 105. And this code is good for 24 months. So it's good for 2 years, and that will get you through this semester. And if you've been off for a year, that code is still good for you. You'll also need the lecture supplement, and that's this semester that is orange covered, right? The orange supplement that I see in the room, and that's what I'll be lecturing from. You definitely want to bring that to lecture day after day. And you're going to need the lab supplement, that's blue covered, right? And that's something you'll need for lab. And then when you're up at the bookstore, ask them for some Scantron 884-E forms. This is a double-sided 8.5 by 11 Scantron form. I'm the only person on campus who uses this particular form. So this is not an orange form. This is not the ParScore forms that some of those instructors use. And this is not the single strip or half piece of paper that other instructors use. This is a full 8.5 by 11 double-sided green Scantron form. They have them in the bookstore. I think they're 19 cents a piece. Ask for those. You might have to ask for them by name. Say, hey, Dr. Mack sent me. I need to get 6 of those forms. So that's something you'll want to have. Once you have those, make sure you keep them in a nice, flat, dry place. And then when we get to the urine lab, lab number 10, the very last lab of the semester, you'll need some sort of glasses on, some sort of safety glasses. Other than that, it's a lot cheaper getting out of the bookstore this semester than it was last semester, isn't it? Okay, it's kind of nice. Okay, you kind of smile at the people getting their 105 stuff. Now, how are you going to get your grade? You know what? I just realized I told you to get 6 Scantrons. You only need 5. There's only 5 exams. Okay, typo. So there are 4 lecture exams throughout the semester. They'll be spaced throughout. I'll show you the calendar. They're each going to be worth 90 points. There's 1,000 points altogether. The final exam will be a little bit cumulative, not totally, just a little bit cumulative, and it'll be worth 120 points, so about 25% more than a regular exam. There will be, throughout the semester, 12 to 14 quizzes. These quizzes will be on mastering. They're open book. They're open resource. You should do well on them. The purpose of those quizzes is to help you be well prepared for the exam. There will be between 12 and 14 of those quizzes, only 10 count. So at the end of the semester, I will drop the lowest 2 to 4, however many there are in the end, quizzes. So if you miss a couple or don't do well on a couple, it's going to be okay. Okay? So only 10 of those quizzes will count for 100 points. Then there will be 2 case study activities that you will do. This is a group activity. Most students do these case studies with their lab group because you're already sitting there with them. You've got some time to work it out. I'll tell you more about that later on. They're each worth 25 points. I would call these nice grade boosting points. Okay? There's no reason not to do really well on those, and I'll tell you more about those when the time comes. There will be some mastering A&P assignments, okay? 50 points. So all the homework assignments that are on mastering, if at the end of the semester you have earned at least 80%, you need 90% to check out of the adaptive follow-up assignments. But as long as you have at least 80% on the totality of all of the assignments, you will get all 50 points given to you at the end of the semester. Like I said, most students get all those points. The people who don't get all of them are people who sort of just took a hiatus for like 6 weeks and didn't do any online homework. There will be 4 online assignments getting you ready for each of the lab exams. There are 4 lab exams this semester. There will be 4 online quizzes, again, to help you prepare for the exam. And there will be 4, there are the 4 lab exams, each worth 50 points. There will be a lab report that you will do as a group in the lab that's worth 30 points. And finally, there will be some lab quizzes, each worth 10 points, and 7 of them will count. I think there's usually an extra one in there that we drop the lowest one. So that gives you 1,000 points. That'll keep us plenty busy for the summer. Okay? The details underneath are just simply the deadlines, all the fine print of all these things. You can read through that. Pretty straightforward. The grading scale is the same as it was in the department for all of our classes. The minimum score is at 720 points. That's the 72% cutoff. That C is what allows you to transfer this course to another institution or to satisfy the requirements for nursing or respiratory therapy or whatever other program you're going into. C is always the minimum. Okay, laboratory stuff I'll deal with in lab when you get there. And much of this is very standard language. However, I will say for the students who are in the hybrid section, when I get down to the schedule, the only real difference, again, about hybrid and traditional is that the hybrid students are choosing to not come to lecture, but they're always welcome to. Anyone who's listening, who's in hybrid, and you decide that you would rather come to lecture, come. There's plenty of room. And those who are in hybrid will take their exams in the testing center if they choose, or they can simply come and join us at 4 o'clock on the days we have exams. The testing center, you would simply schedule it earlier in the day, and you will schedule that by contacting the testing center through this information by going to My MCC, go to Student Services, click on Testing Center, and schedule your exams. Within the next couple of days, I will contact the testing center with my syllabus. They'll know all the dates of the exams. When you go on, you'll say Biology 106. It'll give you the options, Exam 1, Exam 2, Exam 3, and you'll sign up for the time that you want to take it. Now, for those who are in the traditional section, all the people that I'm looking at here, you're going to be here at 4 o'clock, right, on the days that we have exams. This testing center option is only for those who are enrolled in the hybrid section. That's the kind of gift they get. If that's a gift, I don't know. But that's the difference, and that's the only difference, okay? Going through here, normally we have a really kind of a nice little area that we call the biology resource room. It used to be upstairs in room 249. It was that little hole in the wall space right across from the labs where we kept some models and computers and some microscopes. And it was a common place for people to hang out and study. It's also where the walk-in tutors would have their office hours. I will have, by the end of today, tomorrow, an email out to you when we will have walk-in tutoring time. We don't have a dedicated space, however. So basically, I don't know which room it's going to be in. It's either going to be in the Biology 106 lab or the Biology 105 lab, right down the hall here, where the walk-in tutoring will be held. We also will have available to you one-on-one tutoring if you choose or you think, based upon your experience in 105, that you would benefit from having a tutor. You want to jump on that now, contact the tutoring center in room 204 and ask to schedule a tutor. That could be individually or as a group. I also want to put out a request, if there's any of you in the room who would like to become a tutor, even for this class or for 105 specifically, please let me know. We are in need for tutors, people who don't have all the answers, but simply are willing to help other students who are looking for that extra help and that assistance. So if you think you'd be interested in helping 105 students, or you'd even want to be a peer tutor for people in this class, you would just meet and you get paid as the tutor, then talk to me, right? Because we need some more folks, and I would appreciate if you would like to consider that. It would work around your schedule. You're never obligated. It would only be times that you would want to do it. But let me know if that's something you're interested in pursuing. What else? The rest of this language is just, the same language that's in every syllabus on campus. It basically says we're accredited, we know what we're doing, please don't cheat, and what to do if you hate me. That's really what it says, okay? And there's a behavioral intervention team. So if you are acting really bizarre, I have a way of contacting people to help you act more appropriate. And also if you see someone else, this is really actually quite serious. If you know of someone who's really struggling in their personal life and it's affecting their academic performance, and maybe they haven't told me, but they've said something to you, this is anonymous, guys. So you can just pop it in, put in the person's name, and there's a trained counselor who will reach out to that person and see if there's something that we can do for them. So it really is it's a very legitimate tool that we put into place, but it's really meant to be, people who might be dealing with substance abuse or mental illness or are very aggressive or acting very threatening to you in some situation. But just know it's available to you. You click on this. It's an anonymous tool. And then the team they'll be there in minutes. There's people on campus all day who will run and be there for that person. So it can be a crisis or something ongoing. If you need to get to your course, here's Blackboard. And so that's just a reminder. I think we all know how to do that. And then notes about lecture. I will expect that you stay current. I think if you fall behind, it is a death sentence for this course. And that's why I have the assignments in mastering sequentially laid out throughout the week rather than all at the end. Too many people were waiting to the very end to do their assignments. If you are in regular class, you're going to be hearing the lectures. If you're in hybrid, please view those lectures as soon as possible. They'll be posted by 7 o'clock in the evening, the day of the lectures on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Please don't let them pile up. Okay, make sure you're staying current with the lectures. It'll help you with the homework as well. So there's no attendance in the lectures that's required. I would suggest that you read the textbook ahead. You know what sections we're going to be covering. Take a glimpse. You don't have to read it in detail, but have an idea of where we're heading. It'll help you as you walk into the room. What else? Makeup exams, unless there's something really significant that you told me, all makeup exams will be at the end of the course, unless there's something way advanced and very legitimate. But oops, I overslept and missed the exam. You'll be taking it at the end of the semester. I never thought I'd say this, but, oh, is it on here? Somewhere I've got it, maybe it's in the lab. About no smartwatches. Isn't that crazy? I can't have any Apple Watches during exams. They're watching for them in the testing center, and I have to watch for them here. So if you have one of those new really fancy smartwatches, just know you can't wear it during the exam. You can wear it during lecture, that's fine, but not during the exam. Have you guys seen what these things can do? Have you heard what they can do in a classroom? So if I have a smartwatch and you have an Apple Watch, I can draw something on the face of my watch, and that image will appear on your watch, and it will just be gone, just kind of appear and be gone. So I could just write 37, and 37 would show up on your watch. And then there's a tap function. You just go tap, tap. The answer is B. It's really cool. No phone, no Apple Watches, okay? We just can't have them. So if you have a smartwatch, just be up about it. Put it down, put it away, not during exams. They're going to become part of our lives, obviously. So it's something we just have to keep ahead of the curve. And if you have any sort of documented disability, if in the past, in high school or here at the college, you've ever received special services for any sort of documented disability, please know that I will work with the office completely and fully. But you need to establish that relationship with the office. They're in room 101, and they're there to help you. So if you've had any issues in the past, or you think you may have an issue that is interfering with your learning, go talk with them. They're really helpful, and they won't tell me what's going on. They'll just tell me that you need more time, or you need larger print, or you always need to sit in the front row, or whatever the issue is for your particular exceptionality. Okay, the rest of it you can just read through. And I would suggest that you turn to 2 or 3 folks right now that you don't know and grab some emails and phone numbers so that you could reach out to them if you had a question. And you'll also be doing this in lab. So this is the only forum for that. So maybe leave some extra room for some lab folks as well. But definitely just reach out, introduce yourself, and exchange some information. Okay, so you've got a few names of friends. And let me take a look at the calendar with you. As you look at this, the left-hand side is the date and then the topics from the textbook that'll be in lecture. The next column is the section of the textbook from which the lecture is being derived. And then the last column on the right is what's going on in lab that week. It's all one's calendar, all in one place for your pleasure. Now, what you're going to find is that after we get through the first 2 weeks, there's going to be something significant every week. So here's a lab exam. The next week, there's a lecture exam. The following week, there's another lecture exam. Then a lab exam. So there's almost something rather significant each week. So I hope that speaks to you and says, gee, I can't get behind. Right? So that's the most important thing. And again, if you need a kick in the pants through a tutor or through someone else, a study group that you're working with, please establish that as soon as possible. I'll go ahead and mention this now. I'll mention it again in lab for each of your groups. But next week, the second week, next Tuesday on the 26th, will be at the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society meeting in San Antonio. I will not have lecture next Tuesday. Okay, there will be no lecture. You already have no school on Monday, right, if you have any Monday classes. And on Tuesday, I will not be here for lecture. I'm also not here on Wednesday, and because of all of that rearranging, I canceled all labs next week. So there will be no Biology 106 labs next week. There will be a lecture next Thursday, right? But there won't be any lecture next Tuesday, and there won't be any lab at all next week, Tuesday or Thursday. And in the lab, I'll tell you about this. But there are going to be some alternative online activities for you to do to make up for those 3 hours of lab that we won't be physically having face-to-face. That's all on mastering, and I will be sending out a very detailed email describing all of that. Now, my only concern about this happening in week number 2 is that it's going to set some of you up perhaps to getting almost forgetful that you have a college class. Because you're getting started this week, and the next week, no lab, and only one lecture. And then we get back in 3 weeks, there's a lab exam, right? So my concern is that you're going to forget that you have a college class called Biology 106. So please be very diligent in going to mastering and just forcing yourself. I know we have a holiday weekend coming up. A lot of people do some really fun things. Enjoy yourself. But then when you get back from Monday, it's time to jump into class. Even though I'm not here and you don't have lab, there's plenty to do on mastering. And if you physically need to come to campus to make that work for you, then come to campus. Come to campus and go to the computer lab. Come to campus and go to the library. You know, don't fall into the trap of trying to stay home with 4 kids between your legs and trying to get this work done. If you physically need to have that separation, come to class or come to lecture. Come to campus. What am I trying to say? Come to campus and make yourself do it, right? Just as if you were coming to class. You might find that that is very, very important for you. As we look at the calendar, here we are Tuesday, May 19th. We'll be talking about water balance and fluid compartments today, and that comes from chapter 25. I'll then, maybe today, and if not today, definitely on Thursday, get started with the nervous system. You know, last semester, hello.
Hello.
Okay, so what was I saying? So we're going to be going into the nervous system, and that's what lab's about this week, and some of the lab you're doing next week. Okay, so that's where we're heading, and then there will be some online quizzes and lab and all sorts of things going on. So this is our schedule, and I'll be walking through this with you step by step. The course pack you have will start with chapter 25, and that's the first homework assignment you have on mastering as well. I don't anticipate the exam dates changing. I've been doing this long enough. I kind of know where we're going to be every day. So I don't anticipate the exam dates changing. If I have to, I would change the content on the exam, but I will hold the test dates the same. Those, again, who are in the hybrid section will be scheduling their exams on the same day in the testing center. Contact me if that will not work for you. So more about the lab when we get to the lab. Any questions on the syllabus? Any questions about what to bring to lecture? We all doing okay? Pretty straightforward stuff. You guys are all mature learners. This is not your first semester in college. Yes? Do you need the Ammerman book for anything other than review? Tonight we're using it in lab. This week we're using it in lab, but I'm giving you what you need? No. So it's not something you need to bring with you, but you guys know that Ammerman lab manual well, right? I mean, you worked through it. Most of you worked through that in Biology 105. You know the pre-labs. You know the pages. You know that book well. It's not something I would have thrown away, right? You got it as a resource. It's okay if you don't have it, right? It's okay if you don't have it. Anatomy hasn't changed, and there's other places. But whatever you use for AMP1, if you have a different lab book, again, nerves and muscles and bones, checking back and reviewing some of that will be important. You also have an atlas. If it's not the one that came with the mastering book, some other atlas. In fact, there's a cart of free books right down the hallway right now, and some of those are lab atlases that are just sitting out there in excess. So maybe if you don't have a lab atlas, grab one of those and use it. The femoral nerve has been the femoral nerve for a few years. It's not going to change whatever book you look at. Okay? Any other questions about resources? Yes?
Well, are we going to have pre-labs like we did?
Not as much. In Biology 106, we assume you're more mature learners. There'll be a few pre-lab activities, but not that many. We assume you come into the lab prepared, having read through the material. There is no lab book. There's no lab manual. There is a lab supplement that will guide you through some things. We'll hand out other things. Other assignments will be posted online and accessible virtually. But there's not many literally fill out and turn in assignments at the beginning of lab. It's a good question. You're going to find it's a very different feeling lab. I think it is. Those who were in lab this afternoon, you think it's a little different?
Yeah.
A little different than 105. We'll keep you busy. We'll keep you busy, but it's in a different way.
It's a little bit more.
It's yeah, it's summer. It's more relaxed. Yeah, definitely. Better chair. We have no more stools. We have chairs, guys, with backs and everything. We are moving up. We are moving up. Okay. Okay. It's actually the chair you're sitting in. So if you like that one, take it with you. It's the same one in the other room. Okay. So that is the syllabus. I also included in your handout the honor syllabus. If any of you are interested, we can always create an honor credit for anyone who's interested. Basically, the way I do honors is I have you read a book, and I've got 3 books that you can choose from. Why We Get Sick, The New Science of Darwinian Medicine, The Emperor of All Maladies, or The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Now, 2 of those books have been turned into movies or series that are really interesting. And you kind of read through that book, basically create a critique of sorts, if you will, and I'll give you some guidelines on that. And that gives you, on your transcript, a honors credit in anatomy and physiology. And I never really appreciated what that did. My daughters both took some honors classes here, and when they transferred to Grand Valley, they actually got out of a class or 2 because they had enough credits in the sciences. And it kind of separated them from other students who didn't have the honor credits. And to do this, there are a few requirements as far as GPA or ACT scores, but you pay for an extra contact hour, and if you make a B or higher in the class, you get that contact hour free. You get it refunded. So it's basically a free college credit as long as you do the work. So it's kind of a nice system. If you're at all interested, you can read through that. It's at the back of your syllabus, and just contact me. There's no rush to get started. I always recommend that students don't even think about honors until after the first exam. And if after the first exam you've got it figured out, you've got the time, you've got the, your schedule and your classes and everything else is going well, and you want to tackle some extra work, that's the time to make the decision. But I wouldn't make that decision until after the first exam. So that is there for you. Okay. So let's take a look. Are there any questions on syllabus, materials, mastering? I think we're kind of through all the housework, the busy work. Anything else? Okay, well, grab your lecture supplement, the big old orange guy, and let's crack that open. And I've got a few slides up here just to remind myself of some things. So we've already looked at the syllabus. We've talked about course goals and the objectives. If you ever, let's say Blackboard goes down. It goes down once in a while, right? And you want to get to mastering, but Blackboard's down. And most of us go to mastering through Blackboard. You can still get to mastering. So you can just go to www.masteringAMP.com, right? And that will bring you to a login. And that gets you around Blackboard. Okay, so there is a way to get there if Blackboard should ever be down and you still want to get to your homework assignments. So just know that that's available to you. And we talked about policies and grades. Please go to your calendar now, your family, your master calendar, and put in those lab and exam dates so that you have conflicts well established and you can talk to me about those if there's any problem. Ooh, that didn't do very well, now did it? Okay, so a little personal introduction that you can't read. It's weird. Hope that's not a sign of what's going to happen the rest of the day. Okay. So many of you have met me before, but I'll just, for those who are new to Muskegon or new to having me as an instructor, a little personal background. I live in Grand Rapids and have a little commute every day, back and forth. My wife is a professor at Grand Valley State University. She's the clinical coordinator and graduate coordinator for the speech and pathology program over there. So if any of you are interested in speech path, you'll probably be contacting her at some point in the future if you're thinking about the program at Grand Valley. I have 5 kids, and so we're very, very busy, like many of you are. I have a daughter who finished with the nursing program recently. She's now at Grand Valley getting her BSN. She's working at Helen DeVos in the NICU unit. And she's also doing Pine Rest mental health inpatient stuff on the weekends just for fun. And then I have a junior at Grand Valley who's pre-med. This summer she's doing a Parkinson's internship at Van Andel Institute in research, and about 3 weeks is heading to Ghana for 7 or 8 weeks with GVSU's Honors College. My son is a junior, finishing up his junior year. He's my football player and is looking to go D1 or D2 scholarship. He's heavily being recruited right now. He's about 6'1", 255 or so, and hoping to grow a couple more inches. The youngest teenager is 13. He's in 7th grade, finishing up. And then my little guy is 7 in 1st grade, and he's attending a Chinese immersion program. So if anyone here speaks Mandarin, I can use your assistance. Yeah, he'll have 12 years of Mandarin, 13 years of Mandarin before he finishes high school. So he should be fluent, and that'll be kind of a fun thing. We can go to China, and he can be my tour guide. My wife and I finished our graduate degrees. We went to the University of Florida. So our undergraduate, our master's, and our PhDs were all earned there. Our first faculty position, actually my master's degree was in microbiology, and then I received my PhD in medical sciences. So my research was in wound healing and diabetes and some genetics and developmental biology, that sort of thing, biochemistry. And my first position was at Washington State University. So we went about as far away as we could from Florida, went up to Spokane, Washington, and my wife had finished her doctorate about the same time, so she was on faculty up there as well. After about 6 years or so, we headed down to Alabama. We went down to the University of Alabama. We were in Tuscaloosa for about 6 years. And every time we move, we pick up a child. And so we're not moving again. And then after Alabama, we're not moving. Okay. After Alabama, we went to Oklahoma for a couple years and saw a few tornadoes. And then we came here to Michigan. And we've been here about 7 years now. So my first job was up at Ferris, and now I've been here now for about 7. This is the end of my 7th year. Wow. At MCC. So I really want to help you guys be successful. How many in here are looking to go into nursing? Just by show of hands, a lot of you. Respiratory therapy, show of hands, 1 or 2. PA, physician assistant, PT, OT, speech, radiography, imaging, dental hygiene, pre-med, pre-vet. You're all pre-something, right? Pre-medicine, anybody kinesiology, exercise science, something like that? Did I miss anybody? Going into microbiology? Sweet, okay. Biomedical engineering, that's right. So we're all going to be around people who are ill, sick, right? And understand that we need to understand anatomy and physiology. So we're in the right place. We're in the right place to get our basic understanding of the human body. And I'm not going to make any excuses. It's rather complex, right? Our body, the good Lord put us together in a complicated way. We have a lot of things to learn. We have a lot of things to discover together. So that's why we're here. So I hope that this summer we're a little bit more relaxed. We still have a lot of work to do, but I'm hoping that the relaxation of the summer doesn't chill us too much, right? We need to stay focused as we go through this. But please reach out if there's any questions at all. In the lab, we will be using iWorks. This is a data acquisition system that will receive, we'll do EKGs, we'll do respirometry, we'll do some muscle physiology work. And so we'll all become familiar with this tool that we'll be using in the lab. Some people aren't the most technologically advanced folks, right? You're kind of scared by this thing, but we'll get through it. It's good stuff. Okay, so this gets us to the beginning of chapter 25. Now, it's kind of funny. If you look at the syllabus, we start with chapter 25 and we end with chapter 25. It's kind of weird. The beginning of chapter 25 talks about where in our body we find fluid, right? In our cells, outside of our cells, and what substances are found in higher and lower concentrations in those environments. Electrolytes, fancy word for things like sodium and potassium and magnesium and calcium. Where do we find those different electrolytes, and why do we care? And once we get through this little introduction to chapter 25, we'll then be jumping back to chapter 11 and talking about the nervous system. at the very, very end of the chapter, of the whole semester, the very last thing I'll talk about will be the last part of chapter 25, because we'll also talk about how the kidneys and the respiratory system regulate fluid, again, back to fluid levels, and how they interact with the acids in our blood. So we're going to start with 25, end with 25 as kind of a bookend type of thing. And so we appreciate from our understanding of general biology that our body is made up of trillions of cells. Each of those cells is filled with fluid, right? Cytosol, cytoplasm. And there's fluid also outside of all the cells of our body. That fluid's really important, right? We're about 2/3 or so water, just like our planet is. And we've got to figure out how to communicate. All the cells in our body need a constant supply of energy. All the cells in our body need a constant supply of oxygen. All the cells in our body need to get rid of the waste products that they're constantly making. And those products are all going to be traveling in large part through the water, right, that is in and around our cells. So we have to start here to really understand the physiology. Now, there's 3 types of balance things that we're going to be looking at in this chapter. And actually 2 of them now and 1 later in the course. We're going to be looking today at water balance. Where is water found in our body? Where is there more of it? Where is there less of it? And we're also going to be looking at electrolyte balance. Where do we find the sodium? Where do we find the potassium? And that'll become just hugely important as we walk into our conversation on nerves and action potentials that we'll be talking about today and next time. Also how muscles work. If the sodium and the potassium aren't in the right place, muscles don't work. And so we'll be spending a lot of time. You're going to be sick of talking about sodium and potassium. And then again, we'll wait on the acid and base balance to the end of the chapter when we come back to kidneys. That's the very last thing we do this semester. That'll be about August 1st, August 2nd. We'll be done, right? Our final exam is August 5, I think. Right? Is that right? 6, 5? What is it? The 6th. Okay, August 6th. So that's the day we're looking forward to. Okay, so August 6th. Okay, that's the day we'll be having our last exam. So not all, many of the systems in your body are helping to maintain this fluid balance. Think about this list. Would you agree that the urinary system is clearly helping with water balance? Check, no problem there. How about the respiratory system? Yes, how? Talk to me. How is the respiratory system helping with fluid levels? As we exhale, we're losing some water vapor, right? We are losing some water that way, for sure. How about the integumentary system? Oh, digestive system? Well, we're absorbing fluids, right? Definitely in our diet, and through defecation, we're losing water as well. Integumentary system? We sweat, we lose. We don't absorb very much, but we definitely sweat out electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and water. Endocrine? Hormones are regulating this, right? So we're going to be talking about ADH, antidiuretic hormone today, and some hormones that regulate thirst and regulate your being thirsty and regulate how your kidneys respond to that fluid. Nervous system, kind of regulate the whole thing, right? Kind of put the whole thing together and help regulate it, homeostasis. Cardiovascular, blood pressure, right? Blood pressure and fluid levels are all connected, definitely. Lymphatic fluid, right? That lymph that is floating through your vessels. So we see, right, most of the systems are quite directly connected to maintaining water balance, and that contributes also to these electrolytes. So that's our little introduction and why we're heading first into chapter 25. It seems like kind of weird, right? Why are we starting with chapter 25? But that's where we're starting in the book. And I'll start off my lectures with the sections that we're looking at. Again, we have some formatting problems here. I apologize. The textbook, as you know, is set up for like 2-page spreads. So as you're looking at the Martini book, every page is like a 2-page spread, 25.1, 25.2, 25.3. I'll have my lecture set up that way as well. And what we're going to be looking at today will be the first 3 sections, 25.1, 25.2, 25.3. And we'll also be looking at 24 or 25.4 and 25.5. Let me get it right. So through the first five sections, if you will, of chapter 25. So that's where you're going to go, and then the lectures will be set up in that order. So, when I say organic molecules, what does that mean to you? Organic molecules. Name for me the organic molecules, or the groups of organic molecules. Another way of saying organic molecules would be the macromolecules. So 4 groups of them. Carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, right? DNA and RNA. Right? Those are those 4 big groups of molecules that you'll spend time talking about if you take a biochemistry class or maybe a nutrition class. That's not what we're talking about here, right? Those are the organic molecules. They all have carbon in them. We're talking about carbs, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Here, my focus is in on the inorganic molecules. Those molecules that, for the most part, do not include carbon. The one exception to that carbon rule is CO2. Carbon dioxide, even though it has carbon in it, is considered an inorganic molecule. Everything else with carbon in it would be an organic molecule. So what we're dealing with here, or the inorganic molecules of our body, would be the water, H2O, and the things like sodium and potassium, and even that CO2 that are in our body. And the fluid in our body and in our cells is compartmentalized, distributed in compartments. We're going to have big compartments like the intracellular and the extracellular fluid compartments. What does that mean? Extracellular is outside of the cells. Now, when you hear about this word extracellular, what other words come to mind? Describe to me some extracellular fluids. I heard lymph. Okay. You agree? Lymph is that fluid in the lymphatic vessels, is outside of cells. What else is extracellular? Plasma, right? The blood plasma. That is definitely extracellular. That is outside of the white cells and the red cells. Even things like tears. Things like digestive secretions, right? They leave the pancreas and they leave the stomach, and those fluids are outside of cells. They're in our gut tube, right? All of those would be considered extracellular fluid. Even the aqueous humor, right? The fluid that's in the front of our eye, or the vitreous humor, the jelly-like fluid ball of jelly toward the back of our eye. All of those would be extracellular fluid compartments. And then there's the intracellular fluid, and that's all the fluid found within your trillions of cells. Okay. Now, what separates the inside from the outside of a cell? What separates the intra from the extracellular fluid compartments? Cell membranes, right? Plasma membranes. And we can appreciate, going back, thinking about that, we're talking about a very thin layer, aren't we? Of what we call a bilayer, right? Of the phospholipids, just a very thin layer that makes up the cell membrane. And that's really what's separating the inside of a cell from the outside of a cell. And if you recall, too, we talked about how some molecules get in and out of cells, right? They have to get through the membrane. So they have to be allowed to go into or out of the cell membrane. So we have this fluid. Now, let's get other names. The intracellular fluid, fluid inside the cells, is also called the cytosol, right? The fluid inside the cells. This varies between men and women, and it also varies a little bit based upon fat percentage. Now, typically, the difference here is simply in fat percentage. Which gender has more fat in general? Women, right? So women have more fat, and therefore, what would you expect? Is there more water, you think, in fat, or more water in muscle? In fat, right? So there's going to be a little bit more fluid on a female, on average, than in a male. The other thing about fluid levels, tell me about the fluid levels. Now, this is the other way. Tell me about the fluid levels in men. Do men have more blood than women on average? Right? Bigger bodies on average, more muscle, requires more red blood cells, requires more oxygen capacity. So that sort of goes the other way, right? There's going to be a difference. There's going to be larger blood volumes in males. So we see that there's differences in the genders, and we'll pick up on that in some tables here in a moment. So here's a little table, and if we look at it, we have adult males on the left-hand side. Not to memorize, just to get the idea. What do we see here? That you're, as a body, about 33% intracellular fluid, and about a third of the cells, a third of the fluid is in the, sorry, what am I trying to say? Water, let me back up. 60% water, okay, in a male. Less water in a female. And that comes down to that muscle mass primarily, differences. Of that 60% water, right? Of that 60% water, 33% is inside the cells. What is this interstitial fluid? Interstitial fluid is another name for what? Extracellular fluid, lymph, right? So interstitial fluid is the fluid found between your cells. It's outside of the cells, it's in between the cells, and that fluid is coming from, right? It is extracellular, right? So it's sometimes called lymph if it's in a lymphatic vessel. It can be called plasma if it's inside a blood vessel. And if it's simply just sitting outside between the cells, we call it interstitial fluid. It's the same stuff, just in different places. And then we see, right, here's that plasma that's specifically in the blood vessels, and then all those other body cavities, fluids like the vitreous humor and the aqueous humor and the tears and all those other, synovial fluid, right? You have a little fluid around your knee, you have a little bit of fluid around your joints. That would also be considered extracellular fluid. And then the male's about 40% solid. The female's about 50% solid. So we just see a little bit of a difference, not to memorize the exact numbers, just to get the overall idea of where and how our bodies are made up of. So we look at our body as what's making up our body. It's about the solid components of our body are making up roughly 40 to 50% of our overall mass. And that body mass is the proteins, the lipids, the carbs, and the minerals. So it's the organic and the inorganic components. So what are those minerals? Let's talk about those. That's really what we're going to be focusing on today, those minerals. Those are inorganic substances that, quote, dissociate. What's that word mean, dissociate? Dissolve, are carried in, right? So, and when they dissociate, we call those electrolytes. So, give me an example of some electrolytes, guys. Sodium, remember it's a charge, it's an ion. Chlorine, right? Potassium, magnesium, 2+, calcium, 2+. Those are all electrolytes. And they float around in our blood in different forms, but also as ionic forms, just like those. So those are the minerals. When I talk about inorganic minerals or electrolytes, that's what I'm primarily referring to, those substances. You've heard of them. We'll figure out more what they're doing here today. So of the body, right, the body is primarily protein. That's the biggest solid component. Proteins make up a big part of your bones, right? They make up a big part of your muscles. That kind of makes sense. And then lipids are the second biggest group. Okay. Fat, storage molecules, lipids. Minerals are actually very, very important and are actually in a greater abundance than carbohydrates. Why would that be? Why are carbohydrates kind of small? Yeah, we're using them up, right? We take them into our body, but we consume them and we break them down into their more smaller components. So they're not being stored in our body, are they? They're primarily being taken in and consumed and broken down, so they're not sitting around creating a lot of mass in our body. Those carbohydrates, though, remember, are important for creating the ATP, aren't they? Right? Not exclusively, but remember that the sugars and the carbohydrates that we bring in, most of their job is to create the ATP. And then what do we do with that ATP? We create the proteins, right? And we create the lipids that we need to survive and sustain life. And then the miscellaneous stuff is just everything else, nucleic acids and other miscellaneous things. So that's just kind of an overview, and there'll be these little review slides. I won't be reading these to you, but they'll be scattered throughout the presentation. And it's just, as you're going back and reviewing your PowerPoints, it's important for you to ask yourself these questions, and can you answer them? So this is like a little study guide. It's a little check. Do I understand what I've just been presented? So can you name for me or describe what are the minerals? And can you name the two main fluid compartments? And how is it that cells are able to maintain their internal environments? That's all that homeostasis idea. And we'll be talking a lot more about that as we move through this. So in section 2, fluid balance. So we have to keep the fluid in the right place. If there's too much fluid in our cells, that means there's not enough fluid outside of our cells, right? If there's too much fluid in our blood, what's the problem? High blood pressure. If we have too much interstitial fluid, too much fluid in places where it shouldn't be, outside of our cells, someone's going to be complaining of edema, swelling. So we know that there's a lot of homeostasis going on. Most of us have this all figured out. Our blood pressure is kept in check. Our kidneys get rid of the fluid that we need to get rid of. Our body's not filled with edema and fluid in all the wrong places. So clearly there's a lot of regulation going on as we maintain our fluid levels. What did we also learn back in Biology 105, lab number 2? Solutes suck. So remember that little phrase, solutes suck. Because what is it that's going to draw water from one compartment into another will oftentimes be the solute concentration. And when I say solutes, what am I referring to? It could be proteins, but it also could be electrolytes, right? Sodium is an electrolyte, but sodium is also considered a solute. So if we have a lot of sodium in our diet, what do we tend to do? Retain fluid, right? So we know that sodium is a solute, and solutes suck or gather water and pull water in. So if you're eating too much sodium, you're probably okay as a young person, right? Your body can handle it. But as we get older, and our body can no longer maintain homeostasis as well, that extra sodium becomes a problem for our bodies, and we start accumulating fluid, and we see that typically as higher blood pressure. So people with high blood pressure need to watch their sodium intake so that, right, they're allowing that fluid off their body. So we'll get into all that. But that's a story that you may already appreciate. So we need to have a balance of fluid in and fluid out, right? We all eat and drink all day. What we eat also has a lot of water built into it, right? Meats and vegetables and all that fruit, all that stuff has water in it as well. So we're taking in fluid, and of course we're getting rid of it, and our body has to balance this whole thing out. We're absorbing that water, and also we're making water. We are gaining water not only through digestive system, that is the food that we eat and drink, but we're making water. Do you guys know you're making water all the time? New water. And where is that water coming from? Does anybody remember? What am I writing out? C6H12O6 plus oxygen does what? Makes right? It's not a balanced equation, but that's the basic idea of cellular respiration. So what is every cell in your body doing? Taking in sugar and oxygen, and through a hocus-pocus series of events and enzymes and cellular processes, doing what? Creating waste product CO2. From that we get some energy as well, ATP, and we're also creating water. So we are creating water as a waste product. The body has to get rid of that product as well. That's called metabolic water, right? It's being made by your metabolism. It's not the water you drank. It's water your body's actually making through metabolic processes, through this overall thing of cellular respiration. And then how do we lose water? We gain it through our diet and through our metabolism. How do we lose water? We know this, mostly through urination and also some through defecation and through sweating, right? Evaporation and sweating. Absolutely, we know this. This is not difficult. Also, respiratory, right? As you blow off, you're also losing some water. And water is always moving from cell to cell through the process of osmosis. When I say osmosis, what couple of words come to mind? Passive and water, right? Osmosis is a movement of water from one place to another by a passive process, almost always. There's a couple of exceptions. Passive meaning it doesn't require energy, it doesn't require ATP. It just happens. But it doesn't just happen. Water is being drawn because of solute sucking, right? So we realize that it's not ATP involved, but there is movement of water from one cellular area to another because of electrolytes. We're back to electrolytes. Sodium and potassium and chlorine are driving much of this conversation about where water will be. So when you go to the doctor and they're drawing your blood and their urine and they're looking for sodium and potassium and calcium, there's a reason, right? Those things out of whack are for a very sick person. So let's just take a look at the fluid balance. This is a typical day. Now, this may not be the typical day on a hot summer day. This may not be the typical day on a cold day where, maybe you're not eating or drinking as much. My point is, these are averages. And, like it or not, in physiology, averages were largely established by the idealized 25-year-old, 150-pound male. Okay? So for years, human medicine and physiology was based upon the 25-year-old male who weighed 150. Is that person here? Anybody here 25, male, and 150 pounds? What does that tell us? That these are numbers. They're averages, right? They are ideals. But each of us is different. Men and women are different. Age affects us differently. Weight affects us differently. But physiological norms were for years set upon that 25-year-old, 150-pound male. So that's where these numbers probably come from as well. So the average person, the average male, right, 25, 150 pounds, is going to take in about 1,000 mils of water from food, about 1,200 mils of water from fluid, from drinking, and is going to produce, through their metabolism, about 300 more mils of water. That's quite a bit, right? 300 mils. That's quite a bit of water that your cells are producing as a waste product every single day. So 2,500 mils of water in, and oh, by the way, to keep our body fluid balanced, right? We're not taking on fluid usually or losing too much fluid. So we're also going to get rid of that 2,500 mils, mostly through urination, quite a bit through evaporation and sweating, some evaporation as you blow off moisture from your lungs, and a little bit lost in the feces and defecation. So what goes in, comes out. And for the most part, your body deals with that, right? And maintains that balance. Your kidneys pick up. Things would change here, but it doesn't matter. It's a hot day, a cold day. You're drinking a lot. You're dehydrated. Your body is going to maintain this balance in and out. This is just a picture of that reality. Okay. Now, this kind of breaks it up in a different way. Before I told you where that water is coming from, but keep in mind, that was about 2,200 mils. Oops. That was about 2,200 mils. Let me go back to that. Right, 2,200 mils. Where's that number coming from? Right here. Right, combination of food and liquid. Okay. So we go to the next slide, and we see dietary intake at 2,200 mils. But oh, by the way, you're also making every day about 1.5 liters of saliva. If you spit all day, 1.5 liters. That's a lot of spit, right? You're making it constantly. It's being made, but then it's being reabsorbed, isn't it? It's kind of this constant reabsorption going on. Your stomach is making about 1,500 mils of gastric secretions. The acid and the enzymes that are being released with fluid in your digestive system, in your stomach, quite a bit of fluid. Your liver is releasing about 1 liter of bile every day. That's that stuff that the liver releases that helps to break down fats. your pancreas is putting out another 1,000 milliliters of pancreatic juices to help with digestion every day. So, and another 2,000 mils, another 2 liters of intestinal secretions. Oh my goodness, right? Now, much of that's being recycled, isn't it? It's being recycled daily. And then your small intestine is reabsorbing 8 liters a day. You're only bringing in 2,200, but your body is cycling this stuff, making and recycling and reclaiming. I mean, we're a wonderful, green machine, right? We recycle a lot. And then as we see this, again, there's that feces. We're only losing about 150 mils in the feces. The colon is reabsorbing much of that fluid, and the colon is also secreting out some fluid. The point is, the numbers are the same, right? 2,200 mils in, and from the digestive system, about 150 mils out, plus the urine, plus the respiratory system. It's pretty cool. Now, how does this fluid move back and forth? I've already sort of assumed and mentioned this, and that is there is an osmotic equilibrium. Osmotic equilibrium basically says that water is where it is for a reason. It's in an equilibrium. It's where it's supposed to be. And there will be a movement from inside to outside or outside to inside when this gradient is disrupted. This gradient will be disrupted by the changes in solutes, right? By the electrolytes. So if there's more sodium in one place, water will go to that sodium. If there's less sodium someplace, less water will stay there. So a lot of, like I keep saying, a lot of the fluid movement back and forth and around the cells is regulated by and controlled by these solutes. Water can move very, very quickly, and it takes minutes to hours for this equilibrium to reset itself. So this is always happening. You've always got this fluid moving from one compartment to the next. So let's put this into pictures. This is a very square-looking cell, right? So this is a cell, pretty typical cell. It's got a nucleus, and I see some endoplasmic reticulum in here, and I see some mitochondria. What's this thing right here? That'd be Golgi, right? Remember our little organelles? And this cell, I should say your body, is making 300 mils of water every day, right? That's that metabolic water made by your cells. That fluid is going to be released out into the extracellular fluid. Your body's absorbing 2,200 mils, the same 2,200 mils we saw a moment ago. You're losing through evaporation in the lungs, you're losing through feces, you're losing through sweat, and you're losing through urine. It's just another way of showing the same information in more of a picture. Remember, this is visual anatomy book, so a lot of pictures, a lot of neat diagrams to help us see this. So what happens when you're dehydrated? What's going on? There's been a loss of water somehow, right? Somewhere we don't have enough. So dehydration will develop when your water losses outpace your water gains. Most of us are probably dehydrated more often than we even think, right? How many of you are just constantly carrying around a water bottle and are always sipping on it, okay? You folks aren't dehydrated, right? If you're kind of in that habit of always drinking water. And I see a lot of water bottles in the room, that's good. But then there are people like me who can go all day and never have a sip of water. And this isn't my only source of water, right? But I really don't sip on water all day. Other people probably don't either. So probably my body is more dehydrated than some of you who are constantly sipping on water. But basically, when your water loss outpaces your water gains. So what happens? Water loss from the extracellular fluid, think about this, is going to increase the osmotic concentration. Now, this word osmotic concentration basically means the amount of what? Stuff. Okay. So if I lose water from the extracellular compartments, that's going to increase the osmotic concentration. In other words, if I'm losing water, right, out of an area, what's left behind? Some of the solutes, right? So the solute concentration will go up if I'm losing water. Okay. water will move from the intracellular fluid to the extracellular fluid to try to reach that new equilibrium. And if that fluid imbalance continues, you'll continue to lose water from the intracellular areas, right, from inside the cells. Now, at some point, when this dehydration becomes significant enough, we'll talk about how the body perceives this, and you will then become very thirsty, have dry mouth, and even wrinkling of the skin, things that can show that you are in dehydration. If you continue to lose more fluid, you could also see changes in blood volume, which would affect blood pressure. Okay, so being very dehydrated could have, in the extreme case, an effect on your blood pressure. Now, I'm going to say this word here, shock. This is not you and me walking around and not drinking enough water, right? But if you were bleeding out, had a hemorrhage, and you were losing a lot of fluid from the body, and your blood pressure as a result was dropping, then you could go into circulatory shock. Shock is just a fancy way, and there's multiple kinds of shock, but shock is any situation where the blood pressure drops. And there's multiple ways how that can happen. And one of them is through losing fluid. And that makes sense, right? If we're losing a lot of fluid, if you're way, 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 way dehydrated, not just from not walking around and drinking water, but you're losing fluid, your body's going to try to take that fluid out of your compartments, isn't it? And that's going to lead to less fluid in your blood and lower blood pressure, and it can become so low, your blood pressure becomes so low that you're not getting adequate blood pressure to the brain and not getting adequate circulation of nutrients and blood to the brain, and you'll faint, right? Some sort of shock where blood pressure drops.
There was a girl on the softball team, because I play softball here, and she was so dehydrated that she passed out in the parking lot, and when we went to the game, she just sat there and she couldn't move. We had people carry her until we brought her to the hospital in Battle Creek, where they said she was so dehydrated, like she was losing it from her brain.
Right, absolutely. So her blood pressure had dropped so low that her brain wasn't adequately being taken care of. Absolutely. Yeah, it can happen. It's an extreme case, but it can happen. Stormy.
By you losing so much liquid, though, does that also make your blood more sludgy?
It would, right? So what would happen to the osmotic concentration of your blood? It's in the same conversation. If you're losing a lot of fluid out, that means that the red cells and the white cells and the proteins that are in your blood are actually becoming more concentrated and could, you're absolutely right, change the dynamics of the blood, how well they're going to move through your vessels. Now, that's a very short situation. Your body's going to be adjusting for all this, right? And if it gets way out of whack, the body says, enough, right? I'm going to faint, right? Stop this madness. Go drink. So your body, we're going to see in a moment, the body has all these mechanisms causing you to get thirsty, telling you to drink, and helping you to fix these situations long before they get to a situation where you're hospitalized for being dehydrated. So typically, your body will take care of things. So let's keep going with this. So here we're just, again, looking at nice little pictures. We've got intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. Remember I told you there's more fluid in your cells than outside, right? So in general, more fluid inside ICF. Now, if there's a water loss, right, from the extracellular fluids, what will happen? The body will try to compensate, and water will be brought in from the intracellular fluid out to the extracellular fluid. And as a result, right, the overall intracellular fluid would decrease, and that would help restore the extracellular fluid. Not that difficult to imagine, but it's nice to have the picture to see it. And then we're back, right? Eventually we would be back to restoring that concentration. So that's 25.2, okay? Looking into 25.3, this is really, really important as we move forward. Where are the different minerals? There has to be a balance between the absorption of minerals in your diet and where they're found inside your cells and how your kidneys are getting rid of these ions. So you're absorbing nutrients, right? In our diet, we drink Gatorade, right? Electrolytes are in those drinks, those sport drinks. So we know we're replenishing sodium and potassium into our body. by drinking these. We're absorbing those into our gut. And then we're also going to be getting rid of sodium and potassium, but this is going to be regulated. Our body is not just going to, without thought, release too much sodium or too much potassium. This is highly, highly regulated through your metabolism and through your kidneys. So your body has to maintain these levels and also has to maintain reserves of these levels. We're going to see, as I've already alluded to, that where and the concentration of sodium and potassium is critical for the proper working of your nervous system, proper working of your muscles to contract, proper blood clotting, and a lot of other processes that are critical to life. So if we don't have the right sodium, the right potassium, we're in trouble. So let's take a look at this. Again, where are we getting this? These ions are being absorbed through our diet, for the most part. But where are they being stored? We know this story. What are the bones primarily storing? Calcium and phosphate. Now, calcium and phosphate are very, very important. And when they're both in high concentrations, they form crystals. That's what makes your bone, right? Your bone is made up of two basic things. What's your bone made up of? Let's remind ourselves. You've got inorganic and organic. What's the organic part of your bone? What's the major protein that makes up and gives strength to your bones? Collagen. Am I hearing collagen? Right? That's that protein. The most abundant protein in your body is collagen, and your bones are largely collagen. That gives strength. Remember, collagen is the kind of protein we find a lot of connective tissues that give strength. But then there's an inorganic portion to your bones, and that's primarily calcium and phosphate. Remember back in Lab 105, we just displayed for you what happens when you drop a bone into acid, and the bone becomes extremely flexible. What did the acid do? Ate away at the mineral content of the bone. Remember this a little bit? So when calcium and phosphate are in high concentration together, they make this crystal that makes bone really, really hard. You never want calcium and phosphate in high concentrations in the same place. Because what do? Make crystals. You never want calcium and phosphate both in high concentrations in your blood. Because what happens? They make crystals. If you've got too much calcium and too much phosphate going through your kidneys, what do they make? Kidney stones. If you've got too much calcium and phosphate in the same place in your liver or your gallbladder, we're making stones. So we don't want this. And that calcium and phosphate may also be highly connected to atherosclerosis, the buildup of that plaque and that crusty stuff that builds up in our arteries that leads to cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and stroke. So we need to store it in the bones, and we need to release it from the bones when we need it. And we'll talk about how the bones release calcium and phosphate under hormonal regulation later in the course. And you're also losing, of course, these ions through the kidneys and through sweating. Right? We sweat sodium out. We sweat. Our sweat can be kind of salty, right? For sure. And then all this is going on to do what? Maintain the proper concentration of these electrolytes in our intra and extracellular fluid compartments. So I've already alluded to why we need them. This is not an exhaustive list, but oh my, sodium, so very important for active transport. Now that's a word you haven't heard in a while. What is active transport? We talked about water osmosis being passive. What is active transport? Any process that requires ATP for that molecule to move. Sodium's really, really important in that. Got to have it. Calcium's also very, very important. Potassium, I mean, they're all important, right? If you look down this list, all of these ions are important for movement, transport, diffusion of movement of molecules from one compartment to another. So without these electrolytes in the right concentration in the right place, molecules will not move or be absorbed into the right compartments throughout the body. Now, I know some of these tables and charts are small, so these are right from your textbook. You are not going to be memorizing these numbers, okay? But as you can see, recommended daily allowance of sodium every day, 1,500 milligrams. That sounds like a lot, but it's not very much, considering how much sodium is buried in most of the foods that we consume. So most of us are way overdoing the sodium. Even if we try not to, we're getting a lot more in our diet than we're aware because of everything we eat. And so not to memorize these numbers, but you'll see our body demands, right, a certain amount of these electrolytes in because we're always losing them to some extent. And when we bring in too much, usually the body gets rid of them, like I said earlier, as we get older. And our body can no longer work through these excesses in our diet, then we start having issues like high blood pressure when we're getting in too much sodium. Iron also, right? Iron's very important, but not very much. Okay, iron's on this list too. That's also an inorganic, isn't it? Why do we need iron? Yeah. Remember, iron is part of the heme group that's carrying the oxygen on the hemoglobin. So we need iron. Not too much, though, because one of the number one things for kids getting toxicity is, right, eating children's vitamins with iron in them, right? So we want to make sure that we're not too much, but just enough. So iron and zinc and copper, those are all metals, aren't they? And they're also very, very important for overall enzymes to work well and for many other cellular processes to work properly. So when we say electrolytes, we're talking about all the things on your vitamin bottle, right? Look at it. There's vitamins, and then there's calcium and potassium and magnesium and manganese and iron and copper. They're all in there. They're all in your vitamin bottle for a reason. Oops. So what I want to do is take about a 5-minute break. Okay, just a couple moments for you to rest and get your brain back in me. I see some of you falling asleep on me. And we'll come back in about 5 minutes. Just go grab a loop around the hallway, get some blood flowing, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up these last little sections. Me too. Okay, so let's continue on. We've got about 15 or 16 or 20 minutes left or so. And let's get through this last little bit. Are there any questions right now? Are we feeling, I mean, it's kind of a story. It makes sense. There's a few things to look at specifically, but I don't think you're straining too much in the brain area right now with this conversation. I hope not. Yeah? Okay. When I finish this tonight, I'll be finishing chapter 25 tonight. What can you do next? Go to Mastering and click on the first assignment, which is about chapter 25. One of them is due Thursday. And that'll get you going. And then there's a homework also for chapter 25, which isn't due until next week, but why wait? Right, there's no reason to wait. Go ahead and do it, and you'll be better off for doing it. Okay, so sodium, number one electrolyte that we need to deal with. And sodium, again, like water, sodium in has to equal sodium out, or else we're going to have some problems. Again, sodium is a major solute for sucking water. So if there's too much, right, when sodium gains exceed losses, what's going to happen? When sodium gains exceed losses, there's too much sodium, water is going to come out of cells and increase the extracellular fluid volume. And when there isn't enough sodium, then that ECF would decrease. So again, sodium's going to be a big player here. And there's going to be a hormone that's going to be largely involved with this regulation, and that is ADH. ADH, tell me what that means. Anti-diuretic hormone. By its name, what must it do? Stop you from urinating, right? Anti-diuresis, anti-P. Okay. Where does ADH get made? Made. Hypothalamus is where it's made, and it's stored and released from the posterior pituitary. And in lab today, you all saw the neurohypophysis. Same thing. Those we'll see it tonight in lab or on Thursday in hybrid. So The neurohypophysis is another word for the posterior pituitary, and that is the place from which ADH is released, although it's made in the hypothalamus.
ADH, is that the one where you drink alcohol on trucks?
Yep, ADH is also going to be interfered with from alcohol. And there's an old-fashioned name for ADH that you may see in some literature. Vasopressin. Now, you may have heard of that. It's the same thing. ADH equals vasopressin. Old-time docs will talk about vasopressin rather than ADH. Vas. Vessels. Press. Kind of increasing, right? And IN on the end tells us that it's a protein, right? So vasopressin is a protein that does what? Increases the pressure on the vessels. Okay, so let's think about it. What does ADH do? Stops you from peeing. If you're not peeing, you're accumulating more fluid. More fluid is going in your vasos, right, in your vessels. So the name of the hormone sort of tells you what it's doing, but that's an older name for the same thing. Vasopressin, aka ADH. So here's a little diagram to figure this whole thing out. So in the Martini book, they always kind of have these little diagrams, and they'll always have a place to start, right? So these things are all cyclic. We're going to walk through this. But something's going on, and there's a normal homeostasis to our sodium. But there's going to be a disturbance. And as a result, we're going to have a large salty meal. So you just had some Chinese, right? A lot of soy sauce on it or something. You just had a bag of chips, whatever. You just had a big sodium intake, whatever that is. So what's going to happen? You've disturbed the homeostasis of the sodium in your body. Now, osmoreceptors. Receptors that measure osmo, right? What is osmo referring to? Osmolarity, which is a fancy word for saying it's measuring the concentration of the stuff, right, that's in your fluids. So osmoreceptors are located in your hypothalamus. Where did I just talk about hypothalamus a moment ago? That's where ADH is made and released from. Kind of makes sense, right? That the same place where it's made is the place that's going to be measuring whether or not I need this stuff or not. So the little alarm at the door of the hypothalamus is an osmoreceptor. Now, if I've just taken in a lot of sodium, that means I have more sodium now in my fluids. That extra sodium is going to increase my osmolarity, the amount of stuff, right, that's in my fluid, and that's going to trigger my what? Osmoreceptors. So what are my osmoreceptors saying? Too much stuff. Okay, so what's my hypothalamus going to do? It just detected too much stuff. The osmoreceptors were activated. Release some ADH. What is ADH going to do? Retain water. Because I've got too much sodium in my body. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try to retain more water to balance that increase in sodium that just was brought into my body. So I'm going to secrete ADH. ADH is going to act where? It's going to go into the bloodstream and travel to where primarily? The kidneys, the nephrons, and basically say what? Shut it down, right? Reabsorb more water, retain more water, reduce urine output, take in more water. And now what has happened? I had all that sodium coming into my diet. My body just said, turn off the spigot. I'm now going to be collecting that water, and I'm going to restore my fluid and sodium levels, aren't I? Okay? So that's one example. Hormones involved, ADH, to restore now my homeostasis of sodium and water. Make sense? So no ADH. Know that hormone. Know what's going on there. Now, let's say it's the opposite, right? It's good to see it both ways. So for some reason, here's my normal. Everything's normal. I'm in normal sodium concentrations. There's been a disturbance. Uh-oh. Decreased blood sodium levels. That can happen too. So now, what's going to happen? My osmoreceptors are actually going to be not activated, but instead inhibited. right? They're not activated. They're going to be inhibited. They're shut off. So what's not going to be released? So ADH secretion will decrease or be shut off. If my ADH is shut off, if my anti-diuresis is not happening, then what's going to increase? Diuresis is going to increase. I'm going to be peeing more. Why? Get rid of the water. If I get rid of water, I'll then be able to restore my sodium and water balance, won't I? Okay? It's a beautiful story. Right? It's a beautiful thing. And we're going to be dealing with these kinds of charts all semester. When something goes out of whack, what's the body's response? What hormones are produced? How does the body respond to that imbalance? And how do we restore it to normal? And when the body can no longer restore it to normal, we call that disease. Right? So hopefully we're in a state where our body is able to handle these changes on a daily or momentary change.
So then are the osmoreceptors detecting mainly sodium?
Mainly sodium. The osmoreceptors are mostly sensitive to sodium. Not exclusively, but mostly sensitive to sodium. Good. Now, when these changes in the extracellular fluid are extreme, it's also possible for your blood pressure to be affected, right? And so if there's an increase in extracellular fluid, your blood pressure would go up. If there's a decrease in your extracellular fluid, then your blood pressure would go down. Not only blood pressure, but also blood volume, right? They go together. So we see now, if we look at the whole big picture, again, normal extracellular fluid levels, there's a disturbance. Again, I've either gained or gained fluid or gained sodium. Something's gone on. That's going to do what? If I gain sodium or gain fluid, what's the net result? Increased fluid, right? Either increased sodium or increased fluid. If I increase my sodium or my fluid, what's going to happen to my blood pressure? It's going to go up. If my blood pressure goes up, in my atria, in my heart, there are some receptors there. They're stretch receptors, they're baroreceptors. And when the pressure is too high in the atria, they release this hormone, and this hormone is called ANP. You'll also see ANH. Atrial, as in the atrium, natriuretic peptide or natriuretic hormone. Atrial, natriuretic peptide, ANP or ANH, atrial natriuretic hormone. Now, what's this hormone responding to? The pressure was too high. Why? Either too much fluid or too much sodium. What is the heart going to say about this? Is the heart happy? No, it's got too much pressure on it. As a result, the atria are going to send out a hormone themselves. The heart releases hormones. And that ANP or that ANH, whatever name you go by, is going to travel through the body and do what? Where's that hormone going to go? If you have too much fluid on your body, where are you going to send the signal? To the kidneys, right? And tell the kidneys to do what? Open the spigot. Let it go, right? Increase your urination. That's exactly what happens. Okay, that's exactly what happens. So, as you increase your sodium loss in the urine and increase your water loss in the urine, and it also decreases your thirst. Okay, because your body won't be thirsty. When you need more water, you'll become thirsty. You'll go drink. And the body can also turn off your thirst sensation, your thirst need. And finally, eventually, you will inhibit ADH. Okay, right? Does that make sense? ANH works the opposite of ADH. Yes? ADH tells your body to do what? ADH tells your body to hold on. ANH tells your body to let it go. Do we see how they're opposite? So these guys are working yin-yang, aren't they? ADH is working opposite of ANH to help maintain your fluid levels. But isn't it cool? You've got ADH being made by the hypothalamus, released by the pituitary gland. You've got ANH made by the stinking heart, right? Two totally different places, and yet both involved with maintaining and regulating your fluid levels in your body. Pretty cool. And then here's the opposite story. So again, decreasing pressure or volume. Why would that happen? Not enough water or not enough sodium. And what's going to happen? Right? It's going to decrease your blood pressure. It's going to decrease your blood volume. That's going to set up another whole cascade of things. When you don't have enough blood pressure, your kidneys get upset. And they start releasing a hormone that we haven't talked about, but we will again, called renin. Renin. Makes sense, it's made by the kidneys, right? Renin. Renal. And this is a hormone made by the kidneys when the blood pressure is too low. Well, what do you think this hormone does? Raises it back up. And how might renin do that? Keep the fluid. But I'm really worried about blood pressure here. So how would I increase my blood pressure in a quick momentary change? Squeeze on vessels, right? So the thing that renin is going to do is it is going to constrict blood vessels. Now, if you squeeze down on a hose, what happens to the pressure on the inside? Goes up, right? So we're going to squeeze on the vessels. And ultimately what we're going to do is increase sodium retention. If I increase sodium retention, what's going to happen? Saw you'd suck. So if I hold on to more sodium, my body will also hold on to more water to help restore that low blood pressure. Okay, so I'm going to decrease my water loss. I'm going to increase my thirst. Renin's going to make me go to the water fountain. Renin's going to tell my brain, I'm thirsty. Go drink. Okay? And as a result, increase my water intake and again, restore my imbalance back to normal. Do we see how all the body systems work together? So cool, right? We got the cardiovascular in the heart, we got the kidneys, we got the brain, we've got blood vessels responding to it, and there's even more in here that we'll get to in greater detail later on. This is kind of just a big introduction. Okay, so what if you are you have hyponatremia? Let's break that down. Hypo, low, natria, or natri is sodium. Emia is a abnormal condition of the blood. So hyponatremia would be too low of sodium in your blood. Is that a problem? Oh yeah. What can cause it? Right? Overhydration, drinking too much. Can that happen? Do you remember? Well, you guys are all way too young. There used to be these crazy radio contests where people would call in and be one of the winners, and then to be a winner, you got the right to go down and hold on to a car, right? And or you had to sit there and drink water, like, I don't know, a gallon every 15 minutes, and you kept drinking water, and the last person who couldn't drink water won the car or something crazy. People were dying, drinking too much water, right? You can do it. It doesn't happen very often, but if you're really forcing yourself to get a car, drinking too much water, you can actually lower your sodium levels to the point where, right, you have an inadequate salt intake and some things can go out of whack, especially if you have any kind of predisposition to an imbalance. What about hypernatremia? Same story, right? Other way. Too much sodium. Why? You're probably dehydrated, right? You are now dehydrated and you're not getting enough water, and so your sodium levels are increasing from that imbalance. Keep doing that, sorry. Okay, jump over that little review slide, and now I want to show you what happens. What effect does the inhibition of osmoreceptors have on ADH? Think about that question. Now, I didn't mention aldosterone. It was in the slide back a ways. But aldosterone, where do you think it's made? Aldosterone is actually made in the adrenal cortex, okay? And it is one of those hormones made by the adrenal glands. Again, another organ that gets involved with fluid levels. Go back and look. You'll see aldosterone mentioned right here. So where I mentioned renin, also you increase your aldosterone. So add that to your list. So right now, what hormones have we talked about? You need to go back and figure out where do the following hormones play a role. We've got ADH, We have ANH/ANP. We have, remember ADH was also vasopressin. We've got renin. We have this aldosterone that also increases. That's enough, right? Okay. So we got those 4 hormones right now to kind of hang on to and figure out where they fit in this story about water balance. Okay, last little bit. What about potassium? Potassium's important too, isn't it? So sodium's one thing, potassium's another. We can also have imbalances in our potassium levels. Again, this could be from problems in diet. It also, though, could be a problem with, you've heard it, but we didn't talk about it much, the sodium-potassium pump. And the sodium-potassium pump is a very important transporter of sodium-potassium. And what that pump is going to do, it's going to make sure that sodium and potassium are in the right place. It's actually this transporter that makes sure that sodium's in the right place and potassium's in the right place. And it requires active transport. What does that mean? It requires energy. Okay? So this pump can get worn out, if you will, and this can lead to some problems with potassium. So here's what I want you to understand. This is our big take-home lesson in the last minute and a half here. Potassium. Look at this little diagram, and what do you see? In this little diagram, and it's not the clearest thing, but in this little cell, potassium is a large presence. There is a lot of potassium inside your cells. I need you to remember that. Potassium is in much higher concentration inside cells than it is outside of cells. Okay. Just remember that. Potassium's more on the inside than on the outside. And I'm going to jump over and well, what I'm going to finish up this last little bit next time. But before you leave, you need to understand this. This is our take-home lesson right now. Look about 5 or 6 slides ahead. Do you even have this? Okay. I will make sure this gets posted for you. This was my take-home lesson. Here is sodium. Oops, it's my last slide, and I just added it in for clarification. Sodium is this column. This is intracellular fluid, and this is extracellular fluid. Now, it doesn't say that. It says plasma. Do you agree? Plasma is an extracellular fluid. Look at sodium. Where do we find sodium? Sodium is more extracellular. There's going to be normally far more sodium outside of a cell. Now, look at the next column. This is potassium. Potassium is found where? Far greater concentrations inside the cell. I swear to you that is so important. Okay? Now, look at the next one. The next one is chlorine. Chlorine's always found where sodium's found. And that's easy to remember because what's NaCl come together to make? Salt, right? So sodium and chloride just love each other. They hang out together. So wherever sodium is, chlorine's always going to be. That's not hard to imagine. And then what else do we see? Phosphates, more on the inside. But here's what's interesting. Last point. Even though sodium and potassium are in different places, look at the, I'm going to clean this off, look at the osmolarity. That is the balance of water and solutes. What are they? The same. So even though sodium's greater on the outside and potassium's greater on the inside, and chlorine's more on the outside and phosphates are more on the inside, in the end, there's the same osmolarity, the same overall balance of water inside and outside when it comes to this balancing equation. So that's an important concept to appreciate. When we get together on Thursday, I'll go back and review a little bit of this and get back to the last 10 or so slides, and we'll pick up and go into the nervous system because it's going to be important that we understand that sodium's on the outside and potassium's on the inside, as we move into talking about how action potentials and how nerves send their signals. So we had to get through this conversation about sodium and potassium to understand the nervous system in chapter 11. So you've pretty much had what you need. Don't wait. Go check into mastering. Check out those a couple of assignments dealing with chapter 25 and see if that doesn't help really solidify all that we've learned today. And I'll see you all in lab tonight or on Thursday.